Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov. We are in the Or L'Tzion, the writings of Rabbi Benzion, Abba Shaul. If you look at the Google Classroom, the Zoom invitation that was sent out, there should be a link inside of it to a Teshuvah of Rabbi Benzion, Abba Shaul. It should say Or L'Tzion, pizza. Click that one. Or L'Tzion is a book written by Chacham Benzion Abba Shaul. I spoke to you about him at the end of last week's class, though off the record. So those of you who are online, Mechila, you lose out by not being in class. So, no, if you need to know anything, you could reach out privately. But we are reading his writings in his book, Or L'Tzion, Volume 2. This book was written by Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul, though it seems that there is some controversy among the opponents of Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul as to how much of this he wrote, how much of it was edited. Nonetheless, we consider it an authoritative source of the rulings of Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul. Why am I bringing you such a late source for the beracha and pizza? I don't have earlier sources for it. I wish that there would be some kind of Italian source, but the truth is, like we mentioned before, that Italian pizza is very different than the type of pizza that we eat. So likely, and I don't know how far back Italian pizza even goes, but the pizza that you and I call pizza with sauce and cheese and all of that and fruit juice and the dough or milk or whatever else, it's a fairly recent invention. Let's read the Teshuvah of Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul. Now, his answers are very short. Like the writings of many Sephardic Chachamim, their Teshuvot are very short. Why?
Get to the point.
Get to the point.
Get to the point.
I want to read you a quote. I've been thinking about this quote. I'm not sure if this quote is right. I just know that it's a quote that I read. Yeah, give me a moment to find it.
As another answer, it's also probably better to be very direct so that what you're saying can't be read in another way if you're just going to go on and on and on.
Correct.
You don't need to extrapolate anything.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is correct. I read it and I thought it would be interesting to share. Rabbi Yosef, when he published his book Chazon Ovadia, there's a Rabbi Shai Zevin. Who's Rabbi Shai Zevin?
Isn't he the one who wrote the books on Chassid?
Yeah, Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zevin. Rabbi Shlomo was a famous Chassid. I think he was a Chabad Chassid, but of the old school variety of Chassidim. He wrote many interesting works. Some of them have become classics in the Jewish world. He wrote a review. And this review about Chazon Ovadia says the following. The literature of the Middle Eastern and North African Jews lacks both the sharp dialectic of Galician and Polish Torah literature and the analytic or logical depth of Lithuanian texts, before you get offended. Instead, its commentaries are characterized by calmness and equanimity, which I don't even know what it means. And its responsa are marked by an extensive familiarity with use of later authorities. The Teshuvot of Chachamei Sfarad tend not to be so crazy. They're not full of pilpulim and back and forth. They're pretty straightforward. They're calm. I like the word calm. It's a nice word. I don't know what the rest of it is trying to tell you. But calm. There's calmness in Teshuvot of Chachamei Sfarad. Harav Peretz once told me how he enjoys the Teshuvot of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein even more of those than Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Not because Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's Teshuvot are lacking, but precisely because they're so long. He says, when you're right, you don't go out of your way to prove that you're right. You're just right. People who try to prove things too hard usually are trying to prove that even though they're wrong, they're right. He says sometimes, and by the way, he's not Chaz v'Shalom saying you shouldn't prove your halachic stances. But, some Chachamim, they write something, and they give you a source, 2 sources, 3 sources. You analyze it yourself. Don't rely on me. Go analyze it yourself. That's the truth. Some Chachamim, the beauty of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's Teshuvot is not just in the sheer numbers of books that he quotes, that's a beautiful thing in its own right. It's amazing. You write a Teshuvah, 350 sources inside of it. It's not a normal thing. By the way, about 345 of them which don't exist in any bookshelf in any library in the world. So you almost have, there was a complaint about Rabbi Yosef that he quoted books that we would never have a chance to fact check or verify. which is not fair, right? You can go to HaShamayim library and look at a book, not the end of the world, but it tells you much about how many books we're not familiar with. His library became a matter of war between descendants. The suggestion was put out there that his library should be turned into a library for Talmidei Chachamim in Yerushalayim. It should be a place, like a non-profit organization. People can go and learn from those books. The unique thing about Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's books is not just that he owned them, but that he wrote notes in them. And so I have a few books in my house. For them, I have a book, Peli Yoetz, Teshuvah. The most amazing feature of it is not that they first time in history publishing the letters of the Peli Yoetz. The most amazing feature is that it has in it the notes that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef wrote on the sides of the pages, which for me is an incredible resource. Sometimes I buy old books. Most of my books in the house, if they're selling it in your local Judaica store, the chance is that I'm not going to buy it. So if it's a book that I'm going to buy, likely it's been out of print for a while. So I get to my books. Sometimes other Talmidei Chachamim wrote things in the corners of the pages. For me, that's an incredible. There's a commentary of Rav Uziel in the Talmud, little snippets like notes. Look here, look there, and it's put out in 2 volumes. I have it at home, and it's amazing. For like the first 40 years after Rav Uziel died, there was no commentary of Uziel in the Talmud. The reason being, as soon as he died, his children were not necessarily observant. And his books were borrowed by other collectors. Yes? And it happens to be that somebody who was once a student of Rav Uziel went to visit a very famous rabbi whose name I cannot mention here on the camera. He went to his home. He had to look up something in the Gemara. Lo and behold, he sees the handwriting of his rabbi, Rabbi Uziel. And it turns out that this whole set of Talmud was borrowed by this rabbi, who then had to be paid a significant sum of money to allow them to borrow the books back and print these little notes from inside of the Talmud. That's just the way the world works. How do we get there? Rav Moshe Feinstein, he writes at Teshuvah, and he gives you a few sources, and people will tell you Rav Moshe Feinstein's books lack academic rigor. It's intentional. You want to work hard, you work hard. I know the answer. This is where I looked. Chacham Ovadia Yosef, aside from the multitude of sources he brings, he almost sets you up for failure to disagree with him. Because he pretty much asks every single question you were thinking to ask. He also asks 4 or 5 or 6 of the ones you weren't thinking to ask, but you will eventually try to ask, but you didn't yet know that you needed to ask them, and prove that you're wrong, only so that at the end of the Teshuvah you'll come to agree with his conclusion. Now that's a tremendous amount of limud Torah, but I would say you can't learn from the Teshuvot of Chacham Ovadia Yosef that's the way Sephardic rabbis wrote Teshuvot. It's almost not the way Sephardic rabbis wrote Teshuvot, but for more reasons than just what I mentioned now. It's his own unique style. He wrote his Teshuvot in his own way. In old Sephardic yeshivot, though, the response to literature, She'el v'Teshuvot, was very important. In fact, whereas for a Sephardic yeshiva, Ashkenazi yeshiva, you would come to yeshiva and you would try to get it into an entrance exam, they would give you a passage of Talmud, and depending, according to which commentary you understood the Talmud, that's where they would either accept you or not accept you, or how they put you in the shiur. By Sephardic yeshivot, there were entire courses in which the rabbi would give you a question in halakha, like which blessing do you recite on pizza? He'd throw out 10 or 15 sources to you, and by the end of the day, you were expected to reach the same conclusion as one of the authors who used these sources to write a teshuvah. Almost like you were expected to be taught to write teshuvot on your own. And there are very few places in the world that still teach people how to construct a proper teshuvah. Not just to write a book, but a proper teshuvah. So Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul writes a short teshuvah, and then he writes something a little bit longer on top, underneath. Ma mevachin al pizza. What do you say? What's the bracha on pizza? Teshuvah. Here's the answer. Im habatzek nilosh b'chalav or b'shemen. If the dough is kneaded with milk or oil, umargish ta'amam, and you taste the flavor of the oil or the milk in the dough. Mevarech ala pizza borei minei mezonot. You recite mezonot on the pizza because that's the definition of Maran. It's one of the definitions of Maran of pataba b'kisnin, right? Is that dough that had things mixed into it that you could taste. Achim habatzek nilosh belo chalav uvlo shemen. If the dough was kneaded without milk or oil, mevarech aleha hamotzi lechem min haaretz. You recite on it hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Af sheyesh ala batzek resek egvaniot v'chadome. Even though there are toppings like sauce or cheese on top. Elim ken nivla haresek b'toch habatzek. Interestingly enough, unless the sauce is absorbed into the dough, in which that becomes like dough that was mixed in with sauce. At that point, the blessing that you recite over this is borei minei mezonot. Before you even look at the notes, when he tells you that the blessing on pizza is borei minei mezonot, the reason for that is because
The taste of the milk or honey or tomato sauce.
is in the dough. So you taste other things in the dough. That's assuming you could taste those things, correct? Let's use the example of tomato sauce. Of course, the dough absorbs it. It could be that if you bake the dough first.
More sits on it.
It's on the top.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't. It's not like it's
If
permeating
it's
in the
mushed
dirt.
in, I don't think that would make a good pizza.
I agree. It's usually sitting on top.
Let's say you put enough milk or oil or apple juice in the dough, right? And that makes it a mizonot, okay? That makes it, why does it make it a mizonot? Because it has what category does it put into? Pata baba kisnin. Pata baba kisnin is only a mizonot until
You eat a certain quantity.
you eat a certain amount, which is kviut suda. How much is a certain amount according to Maran? The Ashkenazim have a more subjective number. Maran, I believe, is 3 eggs or 4 eggs. How much pizza is 3 eggs or 4 eggs?
Definitely 2 slices, maybe
1.5 to 2 slices?
What kind of eggs are you eating?
Only depending those
One is made-
pizza the taraf.
Yeah.
Every slice is a quarter of a pizza.
Okay, so now it depends, I guess, what kind of pizza. There's a mini little pizzas. I'm not talking about pizza bagels. I'm talking here about a pizza, family-sized pizza. Though we'll never get those family-sized pizza. This pizza, I don't know anybody who eats less than a slice of pizza. What? That's just sad, right? People sometimes, b'li anhara, they go out to dinner with their friends, they order a pizza, you order a pizza, they order a pizza, she orders a pizza, everybody orders their own pizza. The family-sized pizza, it feeds you. This amount of pizza, according to everybody, would be hamotzi. So when they tell you pizza is mizonot, of course, unless you're koveh seuda, likely if you're going to dinner at the pizza shop, that's called kviut seuda, no? It would be lacking integrity to tell me that it's my snack. We came here to snack on pizza, and we're going to go home and eat ice cream for dinner. Yes,
Let's play the game. You are snacking on a slice of pizza.
let's say.
Let's just say that. How do you know it tastes like milk and oil on the inside of the dough?
Okay, you could check once.
Do you take a little bite or?
Check.
It always looks oily, pizza. I don't know that you could say the dough
Taste?
tastes like oil.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I
Can you
don't know.
taste?
I don't know.
Have you ever had oily bread before? Haven't anyone had a Yemenite kubane before? Remember a Yemenite kubane? Have you ever had that in bread before? I don't know why people are still eating chalot when there's. If you want to die young, kubane is the much better road to go down. Like die on that altar. You know, that's kubane is like. If I had to kind of, it's like deep dish Yemenite pizza. If I had to call it a Yemenite challah, like that would be. It's a high dough that's drenched in oil. You eat it, it falls on your shirt will get oily. That's the type of it's delicious. I'm certain that it's not good for you. That especially when you dip it in honey or something like that. That bread, so that's oil bread. It could be, and I didn't look in Yemenite responsa which bracha Yemenites would recite in kubane, right? Which is a good question, actually. That's a very, very good question because we have a list here in the back of course the Iraqi rabbi doesn't write anything about the Yemenite breads. So I will look inside of a Yemenite book and get back to you. But that would be bread that tastes like oil. I mean, that's a primary component of that bread. I'm not sure the little bit of oil that someone puts inside of their challah or their pizza, that makes it now oil bread.
How much apple juice or challah would they put in?
Well, he did not say fruit
He didn't
juice.
say fruit juice. That's
By the way, let's say you put fruit juice. The Ashkenazim seem to say that if it's a majority fruit juice, even if you can't taste it, but the majority is fruit juice, I mean, you put, let's say, a quarter of a cup water and 3/4 of a cup apple juice. That makes it mizonot automatically.
Forever?
No, but Sephardim don't accept. It's a matter. Maran says taste is a taste. Taste is likely if it's the majority you'll taste it, but that doesn't have to be the case.
Will Ashkenazim also then go according to quantity in addition to lack of taste? But
Yes,
quantity?
yes.
Yeah.
So it can technically be a chumrah or a kula in either direction if you think about it enough. Let's see what Rabbi Benzion writes in the bottom. In Hey, in the left column. Pat sheni losha b'chalav o b'shemen. Dough that is kneaded with oil or milk. U'margish hatam b'chalav o b'shemen. You taste that. Mevarech alei borei minei mezonot. K'mvar b'Shulchan Aruch. Like Maran explicitly says in the laws of Pata Bava Kislev. She'isa sheni losha b'dvarim acherim. The dough that is kneaded with other things, that go on b'shemen or dvash or chalav, like honey or milk or oil. Be'ofen she'margish hatam that you taste it. Mevarech borei minei mezonot. Maran says you say mezonot. V'im lo nilosha b'chalav. Even it's not kneaded in dough. If it's just regular dough, and many people make dough for pizza, just regular dough, there's no apple juice and no milk and no, then even though it has sauce and cheese and everything on top, you say hamotzi, as long as the sauce is not absorbed into the dough. That dough will be considered as if it was kneaded with tomato sauce.
Question on that, when he's talking about the sauce on the dough, is he saying the dough as it has to be still in raw form, or like after it's cooked and the sago, like your bread is soggy?
You know, this is a unique chidush to Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul. Look at the parentheses for a second. Where does he get this idea that the sauce on top will now make it mizonot? Look at what Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch. Shekadav, he says, Isa she'irev ba, dough that you mixed into it, sauce or milk or. And he doesn't say like what the Rambam says. Isa shelasha, that you took dough and you kneaded the dough. I keep translating Maran, you kneaded it with the dough. He's trying to see in Maran that Maran says just as long as it's mixed together with the dough. It seems that no matter, even if it's a little bit mixed or it's actually kneaded in the dough, it's all the same. Do you accept that, chidush? I have a hard time with it. In that case, so what happens? You take some jelly, you put on your bread, and it gets absorbed.
Well, he's not saying bread. He's also saying
He's saying dough. Okay, dough.
Yeah, though many pizzas will be par baked and then they'll put on the. Well, not in pizza shops, really.
No, that's still a dough.
Right, it's still dough.
The reason for this, שבשולחן ערוך שם, that in our section of Shulchan Aruch, Maran writes, פשטידה הנאפה בתנור בבשר או בדגים או בגבינה, פשטידה, not casserole. פשטידה, empanada, that's made with fish or meat or cheese, מברך עליה המוציא וברכת המזון. ויקשו האחרונים, האחרונים ask, דמה ישנה ממש כתב מרן בציב זין שנותן ביסה סוכר או שקדים וחלום ורבון מזונות? How is it different than the earlier case of Pata Bava Kislein? Why does Maran say that empanada, pashida is hamotzi, and those things are mizonot? ובשלה דף צדי א' תירץ, and the Shla answers, כיוון שממולא בבשר ודגים שדרך להפת בהם את הפת, הרי הם תפלים לפת. Because this case, or it's stuffed with meat or cheese or fish, those are things that you eat with bread. When do you eat fish with bread? Bagels and cream cheese and lox. Very good. What else? That was the most Jewish answer I got tonight. What else? What did I say? Ashkenaz normative Jewish answer I got tonight. What else?
Whitefish salad.
Whitefish salad. Tuna on a bagel. Everything. Fish tacos. Thank you, Oren. Someone tell me fish tacos. Yeah? You're eating this with, it's something. When do you eat meat with bread?
Sandwiches.
Any sandwich. But tell me what, a burger, a hot dog, shawarma, kibbeh, very good. Lachman bajin is a good question. What the bracha on that is, the machloket, the major machloket among the.
What about the Ashkenazi gefilte fish? Is that flour?
You know, somebody once, it's a good question, what bracha you make on gefilte fish. They say that in Puat Yosef, in Puat Yosef they didn't have paper towels. I had a rabbi who learned in Puat Yosef. They had one of those towels that that you go to some synagogues and they have this huge towel that's hanging off a pole and you kind of dry your hand and then you roll it down. Yeah. So he said that you used to say al nitilat yadayim when you dried your hands in the towel because it was so wet, and when you ate their ktzitzot, their meatballs, you said hamotzi on the meatballs because it was more breadcrumbs than it was meat, right? So maybe gefilte fish falls into the same category, though I much prefer a first bracha of asher yatsa and a second bracha of hagomel l'chayivim tovot. So he says this is different because these foods, these are foods that you eat with bread, and therefore they're tafel, they're secondary to the bread. And therefore, on the top of the next page, you recite the blessing of hamotzi. Uvasiv Zayin, and earlier in the Shulchan Aruch, the Ayri Bishkedim Vegozim, he's talking about nuts and almonds. She'en derech lapet b'metapat. You don't normally put that on your bread. Mevarech borei nemzonot. You recite borei nemzonot. Viviyom Magen Avraham Sham, and the Magen Avraham quotes him halacha. V'ataz tiretz shekan Ari b'kava sudato aleh, val belo koveh borei nemzonot ve'rod b'kav ha'chaim sham. And the Taz, like we learned already, says it has to do with kviut suda or not. And he said there are other answers there. He quotes here, V'ine beven Ish Chai, in the Ben Ish Chai, Parashat Pinchas, in Parashat Pinchas, Ot Chaf, in section 20, he says, Katav shebatzek shasui kisad lechem, the dough that is made like bread, emumura basar or dagim ugvina, and it is stuffed with fish or cheese or meat, mevarech ala borei nemzonot. That is against Maran. The reason is because he's concerned with the Taz's opinion, and so he says, when you're in doubt as to which blessing you make, don't make a hamotzi, because, like I told you, Sephardim, including the Ben Ish Chai, rule against Maran when it comes to Savek Brachot. Nonetheless, it seems like the real opinion is that of the Shla, שכן מוכח מדברם מדבר ראשונים, כמו שכתב בביאור הלחשם, דבר בשתייה, ולכן אין לחוש לסבן. You don't have to worry about סבק ברכות, because it seems like the real difference between earlier opinion of Maran regarding nuts and those things, that they don't go with bread, but fish and meat and cheese, you do usually eat them with bread, and therefore they are tafel to the bread. ועוד, and furthermore, שאפשר שבפיצה שאינה עשויה ככיס, that pizza, which is not made like a pocket, אלא הגבינה ושאר הדברים נמצאים עליה, and the dough is on top of the dough, the toppings are on top, but not inside. Even the Taz will agree that in that case it will be hamotzi. And that it has already become the minhag to say hamotzi lechem min haaretz. From where do you find a minhag to recite on pizza hamotzi? He brings a precedent. All the Sephardim said hamotzi on, not pizza. Shayu mevachim al lachma bajin. You know what lachma bajin is? Yeah, imagine like Syrian pizza bagels, but switch the cheese with meat. They're really good. They're really good. By the way, Syrian food in general, I haven't had Syrian food. 17 years, maybe 15 years. Some of the best food you'll ever eat in your life. Aside from the chokhmah and the wisdom of the chachmim in Syria, the food of their wives wasn't half bad, just for the record. And so lachma bajin shu ke'en pizza im basar hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Sephardim say hamotzi on lachma bajin. ולכן פיצה בלא חלב או שמן, כיוון שנותן בה רסק, עגבניות וגבינה וכדומה, שדרך לפת באמת הפת, מברך עליה המוציא לחם מן הארץ. All of the toppings that you put on pizza are things you eat with bread, and therefore that makes it המוציא. והוא הדין לבורקס. The same is true regarding בורקס. But, B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow, I'm going to continue with his conversation about borekas, because borekas is slightly different than pizza. So I'm going to pause right here in the Teshuvah of Rabbi Benzion Abba Shaul and tell you that from now, Chacham Benzion Abba Shaul tells you that pizza is not going to lose its status of mizonot because of the toppings on the pizza. If it will lose its status of mizonot, it's because of the ingredients in the dough. But that's only if you taste those ingredients in the dough. And even if you taste those ingredients in the dough, as long as you're koveh seuda, and he doesn't say this, I'm saying this because he's quoting Maran's halakha patava b'kisnein, which means all those rules apply, that would be still a hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and the precedent he quotes for saying hamotzi on such food is the Sephardic food of lachma bajin, which is dough with meat on top of it, and Chachamim call that food something that you would recite on in hamotzi lechem min haaretz. God willing, tomorrow I'm going to continue Teshuvah from right here, and then we'll do the Teshuvah of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef right afterwards.